Hello, welcome back to the channel. I've been quiet for a couple of weeks. Let me explain why. I've been quite preoccupied with doing a lot of work about the house. This lockdown period's proved useful. There's been a series of things I've been meaning to do over the years, and they've just been slowly building up over time. So I've been getting covered in paint, getting covered in plaster, just generally doing stuff about the house, the garden, the grounds, things like that. So that's pretty much why I haven't actually been putting any videos out. I have got some videos planned, and this one is a short one. And it's come about because what I recently did was I started going through my catalogue in Lightroom of all of the files that I've got over the years, and I thought, we seem to be running out of space. My PC here, I don't use a Mac, my PC has got a 2 terabyte drive in it, and well, in fact it's got 4 2 terabyte drives. It's got a primary 2 terabyte drive that the images are held on, my Lightroom catalogue and everything else. That has then got a second 2 terabyte drive that the data on the first one is copied to and replicated to overnight, so that becomes a backup. And then plugged in externally, I've got a 2 terabyte RAID disk, which is 2 more SSD drives, each 2 terabytes, which are mirrored so that one copies to the other. And that one is updated once a week automatically. And I found out of the 2 terabytes, I was using 1.8 terabytes or 1.7, something like that. And I thought, we're getting low on space. So I looked around, and this video is about some of the utilities that I've actually downloaded and used to keep track of my various files. I noticed that I've got a tool called, I think it's called File Tree. Let me see what it's called. It's called TreeSize. It's a utility, cost about £15 or something, TreeSize Pro. And basically what it'll do is you give it a folder or a disk to work on, and it will tell you where all the files are and how big they are, so that each folder you can identify how many files are one in it, and to how much total storage that particular folder is taking up. And my whole Lightroom catalogue is held under a pictures folder, which is on my drive D, which is the first of my 2 terabyte SSDs. And I noticed in TreeSize that when I looked at the most offending, as in largest files, I found there were 2 or 3 files that were 2.5-ish gigabytes each. And I thought, blimey, that's large. I know the camera takes sort of 60 megapixel images, but why are the files so big? So I opened them up and saw they were panoramas, and they were in TIFF format. And my issue there was that why was a TIFF file that was, okay, 4 or 5 60 megapixel images sewn together to form panorama, but why was the file 2 gigabytes or close to it? So I rummaged around a bit and found out that actually they don't need to be. I downloaded a small utility which takes TIFF files in their uncompressed form, which these files were, and it applies the LZW, I think it was, compression algorithm, which is part of the TIFF specification, to the files. And miraculously, the same file that was 2 point something gigabytes in size turned out to be 80 megabytes after it had compressed it. So this got me to thinking, how much or how many more files were on my computer which were actually massively larger than they needed to be? Now you might argue, were they actually large for a reason? Well, as part of this video I'm going to show you the particular image in question. I'm going to show you both of them side by side in an image comparison utility that I have, and show you that the 80 megabyte file that was as a result of compression has got exactly the same data and detail in it as the one that was 2 gigabytes that was chewing at large quantities of my disk space. So without more ado, I'm going to switch across to screen mode, and I'm going to show you the tools that I've been using and how useful they are. And I'm not sponsored by any of these people, so don't worry about that. And I've been using them for some time, most of them anyway, and I find them incredibly useful. And rather than going out and spending large amounts of money on buying more disk space, I subsequently reduced most of my TIFF files, and there were probably 200 or 300 panoramas stroke merged HDR images, which were massively larger than they needed to be. And I went from about 1.6, 1.7 terabytes being used without deleting many files at all. I did tidy some files up, but that only accounted for a small amount of the saving that I got. I'm now at 0.9 of a terabyte on my drive, and therefore I've increased my available storage massively without spending much money at all. I think I spent about £30 in total on 2 pieces of utility software to make this possible. Anyway, I'll move across the screen and I'll show you what these pieces of software do. Okay, here we are. I've got my desktop here and I've opened up my computer, and I've got set up on my system, I've got a B drive, which is an SSD, which is a small one which I use to put as backups for non-image related bits and pieces. I've got my drive C, which for people that use Windows understand that's normally where the operating system lives, so this is pretty much my operating system disk. I've then got the first of my SSDs, well, they're all SSDs, but these are my image based. I use these for images. And you can see this is a 1.81 terabyte drive, which is effectively a 2 terabyte drive, but there's, you never get the whole storage amount. And there is a second 2 terabyte drive, and then there is a third external 2 terabyte drive, which happens to be configured as a mirrored RAID, so there's added security there. If you have any questions, put them in the section below. If I use terms you're not familiar with, I'll happily explain them. But this is the drive that has all of my Lightroom catalogue and all my images on it. Some people say you shouldn't have the Lightroom catalogue on the same drive as the images, but I've never had a problem with that. And as I mentioned earlier in the intro, this drive is where all my work is done, and then every night, or if I choose to do it manually, every night, certainly automatically, whatever's been changed on here, including if I delete, modify or add or update anything here on this drive, drive D, drive E, which is a copy of drive D, is updated automatically by a piece of software called GoodSync, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so the first application I want to show you is this program called TreeSize Pro, which is a relatively cheap little utility. So if I right click on this, it shows me 2 green icons. The first one is TreeSize and the second one is TreeSize File Search. Now TreeSize itself is the main piece of software I use to actually see where various things are being used up. So I'll open that up and I'll just put it over here to cover the other window up so that it's not confusing, and it goes off and scans wherever you tell it to, and in this case I opened it up on drive D, so it's actually scanned drive D, and what it says there is that there is or I've used 891 gigabytes, which is obviously just a fraction under 1 terabyte of files under this folder called Pictures, which happens to be the folder that's got all of my work and images underneath it. And if we open that up, we can see that my folder for places, which is where most of my images go, is 682 gigabytes in size. 682,000 megabytes is 682 gigabytes, obviously. Lightroom itself is taking 110 gigabytes up, and then these associated other directories in decreasing order have got these different amounts of storage. So the worst case is always configured at the top. So if I open up the Places folder, you can see that my folder for United Kingdom images has got 215 gigs, my folder for Norway has got 154 gigs, and so on and so on. Now, I've already emptied or removed and downsized these files, as I mentioned in the intro, so this is pretty much my slimmed down version. And I'm quite happy with that. I've got a lot of storage space left on the drive, and this represents 20 years of photography, so I don't think I'll fill the remainder of the drives up in the time that I've got left to take pictures, unless I get a camera that takes gigabyte images at a time and chews up disk drives as if they're going out of fashion, which I can't see happening. So this is particularly useful, this particular program, because what it's doing is it's showing me where my main culprits are for using up my disk space. So in the case of opening up UK, there's then England underneath, of which 180 gigabytes is taken up, Wales 32 gigabytes, Scotland 1.5, and so on. so you can then subsequently open them up further, and 75 gigabytes is images from the Lake District, so on and so forth. You get the idea. And this is particularly useful tool for visualizing where the files are, where you might need to spend a bit of time pruning out old files and just deleting things. I have a bad habit of keeping virtually all my raw files, and when I've taken multiple images of the same thing to get an effect, for instance, and I don't need half of the images I've taken, I rarely delete them, but I've been forced to recently as part of this exercise. It took me a couple of days to go through a lot of these directories and just remove files that I know full well I'll never work on, that are replicas or copies and so on and so forth. So that's TreeSize, which I can highly recommend that as a useful piece of software. It's well worth the small price you pay for it, because it's giving you a nice visual representation of where everything is. You can choose with these different options along this bar here to see where information is in different forms. So if you click on a directory, it'll show you like a pie chart, or you can just look at the details here, or you can look at different file extensions to see which files are using up your space. So very, very useful. You can check the age of files, and you can check various other things. The top 1,000 files. See here, as a classic example, here is a panorama. Now this panorama here is taking up the most space of a single file on the whole of this file system. It's taking up 800 megabytes. That's nearly a gigabyte just for one file. And if I double click it and see what this panorama is, it'll open it up for me in Photoshop slowly, and we'll see what file that actually is. I haven't got a clue actually. I haven't done this, I haven't looked at this file recently, so I don't know which one it is. And it's one of my images from Svalbard, and it's opened it up in Adobe RAW. It's a Panasonic DCS1R file, and it's of a glacier coming down into the sea, and it's a stitch of probably about 20 or 30 50 megabyte images. So that file could probably be reduced in size according to what I said in the intro. I might even use it as the example, but I'll cancel that and I'll come out of Photoshop. So you can see this particular tool is very useful. Now I'll close that and I'll introduce you to another tool, which is TreeSize File Search. Now what that does, I right clicked on drive C. I don't want to search drive C, it's drive D I want to search. So I'll right click on drive D and open up File Search. Now essentially this is a very useful file searching utility. It's currently searching on drive D. That's checked here. You can choose to check more drives if you want. You can put a series of conditions into this window here. At the moment it's set up to search for DNG files with a wildcard, and it's got the size stroke attribute tab lit up, and it's saying find any DNG files that are over 100 megabytes. Essentially it's a combination of this set of criteria. You can have multiples in here. I've only got one at the moment. You can have multiples, and you can then add these additional conditions in for it to search for. Now if I tell it to search here, up here's a start button. If I click start, that's going to search the whole of my drive D for any files over 100 megabytes which are of a type DNG. As it says here, asterisk.dng means anything that ends .dng, and you can see I've got a lot of files in here, and again they're panos. The pano extension's been added by Lightroom when I created these panos, and they are fairly healthy sized files, and probably could do with being reduced in size. DNG files don't reduce in size as much as TIFF files, I've noticed, but I'm just showing you what the capabilities of this particular tool is. I use this particular TreeSize file search quite a lot. It actually comes with TreeSize, so when you buy TreeSize itself you get this as a free utility, so you're getting two things for the price of one. Anyway, I will put a link to where you can download these if you're interested in doing so, or a quick search of Google will find you TreeSize. I use those a lot and I find them incredibly useful. Obviously, apart from Photoshop and Lightroom, which are my main editing tools, I also have various other things which I use regularly. And another one that is particularly useful is this Duplicate Cleaner Pro, which I'm loading up now, and it's loading on the other screen, so just wait until here it is. I used this yesterday to find all of the files on my system that were essentially the same images. So if I just run through this, at the top, this tab here allows you to define what it is you want to find, and I've got it in image mode, although it can just search for files, and it can also do audio, but I'm interested in images, so I have the image tab open, and I'm saying include all files up here in this section, and I'm saying find if it's rotated and find if it's flipped. So if an image is a mirror image of the same image, it'll still find it, even though it's the opposite way around. I've got it saying similar file names to search, and I've got it set down here to search raw images because it can actually work with raw images. And I've told it with this tab, the scan location tab, to search in D pictures, which is my main folder that's got all my pictures underneath it. And the results of running this, when I ran it yesterday, if I click on this results tab, because it takes about 2 hours to run, because it has to actually look at every single image and compare it with every other image on the system, which I've got a lot, so that was going to take a long time, and it did. So what the results are showing me are that there are, in the case here, let's take the top two. These are ORF files, which obviously were from my Olympus when I had it, and it said there are two files. They've got the same file name, but they live in two different folders. The first file lives in Pictures AAA Exports, and the second file lives in Pictures Places Iceland November 2017. Now, I know that I've put it in the exports folder on purpose because I export them with a watermark on before I put them on the internet, so they go there. So I know that those two files are not exactly duplicates, even though they might look the same. But what I'm looking for here is each one of these different highlighted or coloured sections is a group, and this is a group of 3 files that the system thinks are all the same. So if I click on one of them and open it, there's a nice picture of near Mont Blanc, and if I then click on the next one in this group, it will open up another window, and that picture looks like this picture. Well, you can see if you look at them closely, they're very, it's the same image, probably shot within moments of the first one, and it is processed slightly differently. It's the right hand one is brighter than the left hand one, but from the software's point of view, it sees those two images as close enough to being the same. I'll open the third one up in the group, and we'll see that's another variation on the same set of pictures. Now I know that those 3 pictures, all of which live in the same folder, which is Pictures AA Exports Framed Alps, they are all deliberate, so I'm not going to delete any one of those because they all have slightly different processing, which was the intention. But my objective in showing you this piece of software is it's a very good way of finding images that you know are very close to each other. So you scan through the results that it gives you, and in my case it's given me 6,722 duplicate files, and you will then be able to, if you want to, say that file I don't want, that file I don't want, and if you wanted to, you can go up here and say remove files, and then any that are selected will be deleted. I'll leave that up to you if you use this utility. I've already done it, so I know full well I don't need to delete any of these files. The duplication that this has found is deliberate from my perspective, so I'm not going to do any more on that. But I did spend 2 days this week actually working through all of these groups and deleting many hundreds, if not thousands, of images which were unnecessary copies of images. You have to be careful, obviously, or it's a good idea to have a backup, and in my case I've got 2 backups. The drive E in my case is automatically updated every midnight, and the RAID disk, which is my drive Z here, is updated at the end of the week. So if I made mistakes on drive D, if I correct them before midnight or realize it, I can go and get them back from drive E, and put them back in place if I made a mistake. And if it's after midnight but it's not the end of the week yet, I can go to Drive Z and go to that and actually get the files back from there, which I find is quite a useful strategy for maintaining my images and my workflow. So those are the main tools that I use. There is a third one which is called Pixillion, and this particular piece of software reduces the size of files. So if you have a file you want to reduce, it will change its format. It can write TIFF files as outputs, JPEGs, BMPs, PNGs, DXFs, and all sorts of things, different file types. And you can, for instance, give it a TIFF file and then say you want a TIFF file that's compressed out, and it will reduce its size without losing any data in it. It's worth a try, it's worth playing with. It's called Pixillion Plus from NCH Software. It's quite time consuming to use it, but it is well worth doing. You have to be careful and check that what it's done is what you expect it to do. What it can do for you is it can actually write output files that are basically the same name as the input file. So I go up here and show you append a number to file name. So the output file will have a number. So if the file was called fred.tiff, then the output file it would write is fred1.tiff. So you can actually generate output files that don't destructively affect your input files and then compare them. And if you're happy with what it's done with the output file, in terms of one, reducing the size of the file, and two, not losing you any information or valuable information in the file, then you can subsequently remove the larger of the two files and keep the smaller one, which is what I did. So I find that really useful. You have to, I'll be perfectly honest, you do have to be careful using it, and it does pay to check what it's done, but I found it invaluable in reducing the amount of storage that I actually had used up on my system. So that's run through some of the utilities. I'll put links to them all in the section below, and you can download evaluation copies of most of this and play with them and see if you like them. I'm not trying to sell anyone's software for them. I'm simply spreading information about software that I find useful. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. Put some comments in the section below and leave a thumbs up if you like the video or found it useful, and press the subscribe button and keep in track with what I'm doing. Anyway, we'll see you on the next video. Well, thank you very much for watching that. I hope you found it informative. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and support it in that way. Thanks very much for watching.